This is Toni Higgins Thrash, reporter for cable station WSPD, here for the Heartbeat Show. And today my segment is on a very special organization in Schaumburg, the American Veterinary Medical Association. It is a very special year for the AVMA, and when we go in, we'll learn more all about that. See you inside. Well, we're up here at the AVMA 5th floor, and I'm here with Executive Director Ron DeHaven, and I'm so excited to be here, and it's a very special year for you, which we'll talk about it a little bit later. I mentioned it downstairs before we first came in. But to give a framework, I'm going to ask you to read the mission statement,
okay,
and I'll read the objective of the AVMA, which will be a great base when we spring forth to talk about AVMA.
Well, the mission of the association is to improve animal and public health and to advance the veterinary medical profession. So we really have a role not just to animals and people, but of course to our members as well.
And I'm reading, you have it memorized, the objective of the association shall be to advance the science and art of veterinary medicine, including its relationship to public health, biological science, and agriculture. So, past AVMA. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Indeed.
How old?
We have a long, proud history. We were started 150 years ago this year. And in fact, the very first meeting occurred at the Astor Hotel in downtown New York City. 39 veterinarians gathered on June 10th to form the association.
And that started in New York.
In New York City.
And then you moved to Schaumburg.
Indeed.
After that, so you've only been in those two locations.
No, actually, I'm not sure. Originally, the group formed in New York City. We had an office in Detroit for a while, then downtown Chicago, and we moved to Schaumburg in 1973. So we've been here for quite a while, but originally formed in New York.
AVMA does so much. So we're going to start with, first of all, how many staff do you have?
We have two locations, most of them, 140 or so positions here in Schaumburg. And then we have a staff of about 10 or 12 at our government relations office in Washington, D.C. So a staff of about 150.
So in this building, how many floors do you occupy? How many do you rent out? To give the viewers a kind of a viewing of how it is.
Right, and we're proud of our Schaumburg home. 5 stories in this building. We occupy about 70% of it. So we have a presence virtually on all 5 of the floors, but about 20% of the space is occupied by tenants.
What is your budget? Can you tell us?
Oh, sure. It's a budget of about $30 million.
$30 million.
Indeed.
Wow. That's why you can do so much.
Well, that's true.
So
that's why we're important to the local community, because much of that money gets spent right here in Schaumburg.
So let's start off with one division at a time.
Okay.
So start with one of your divisions, which I know is the scientific activities,
okay.
And what are some of their activities?
You know, one of the important things that we do for the profession is to make statements or take positions on behalf of the profession. And that can be everything from the appropriate use of antimicrobials, antibiotics in animals to proper treatment of animals. The process of approving drugs for animal use and those kinds of things. So our Scientific Activities Division really focuses on those scientific activities and technical positions for the profession. We have a number of committees and councils that come in here. These would be AVMA members that volunteer their time and their expertise. So they're coming in and lending their expertise as we're developing those positions or policy statements on behalf of AVMA and therefore on behalf of the profession.
This is your 150th year, and I'm going to refer to that, which is right here downstairs. I had mentioned this is a very special year for you. Mm-hmm. And another thing that makes it special, are you not going to have a convention here?
We are. We have a convention every year, but appropriately, since this is our 150th anniversary, 150th convention, too, as a matter of fact. And with our home being here in the Chicago area, it's appropriate that we would have our convention here. So in July 19 to 23, we'll bring about 10,000 people to the Chicago area to participate in our convention. That's everything from continuing education to an evening at the Shedd Aquarium and the Lincoln Park Zoo to just social activities as well. great opportunity for veterinarians to network with each other.
You have quite a few publications. We put a few out here. Can you tell us a little bit about your two journals that you produce?
You know, you mentioned we have 10 divisions. One of them is our publication division. In fact, it's the largest. And so they produce these two publications, the American Journal of Veterinary Research, which is a monthly publication, and then our Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association, or JAVMA, that's published twice a month. So we're really proud of these. This really has become the gold standard in terms of veterinary journals internationally. Has a lot of newsworthy items in there that would be of interest to the profession, but also scientific articles. So we're really proud of those. While we're talking about publications, Toni, I'll mention this. This is what we're referring to as our coffee table book. It is 8 chapters, but each chapter is a different look back on those 150 years. So 150 years of convention, 150 years of publishing our journals, 150 years of leadership and contributions to society. What makes me really proud about this publication, it was written entirely by AVMA staff. So 8 different staff members, each wrote a chapter. We did the design, did the layout, and what would probably be a book that would cost $100, we can produce it for about $20 a copy because we did all of the work in-house. And it's exceptionally well done, so we're proud of it.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. I know that in the publications division, they also work on many, many more brochures than what we have here. I think what we're going to do as part of the segment, we're going to fill a table full of a lot of their publications. And what they can do, the public, they can actually order them just by going to the website, I believe.
Indeed. You know, and many of those are focused on the public. What does it take to be a responsible pet owner? How can we prevent dog bite? In fact, this is Dog Bite Prevention Week. And so while much of our publications, like the journals, are focused on the profession, many of these kinds of publications are really intended for the public and school teachers and school kids.
And these are for children. So
Indeed.
there are, and these are free or nominal cost?
Nominal cost.
Nominal cost.
And my grandkids love the coloring books, so yeah, they're good.
And if you're close to Schaumburg, you just drop by, right?
Indeed.
Well, we talked about the past. We've talked a little bit about the present. So for the future, what is on the boards for AVMA's future that you foresee? Any things that the councils have been coming up? Any issues that are really hot from some of those councils and committees?
It really is a challenging time for veterinary medicine for a number of reasons. Economically, we were affected like just about any profession with the economic downturn. And what we're seeing, and a real concern for us, is perhaps because of that, but also because the pet owning public is going to the internet as a source of information rather than the veterinarian. They're going to some of the big box retailers for products that they typically got from a veterinarian in the past. So the challenge is we're seeing a decline in the health of our nation's pets because they're not getting to the veterinarian on a regular basis like they used to. We're actually seeing an increasing prevalence of very preventable disease. So we're really focusing on that when it comes to the health of our pets. We think that routine checkups by the veterinarian is key to not only preventing very preventable diseases like heartworm, but also early detection of things that might be easily treated if caught early, but could be life-threatening if not. So that's one of our focuses. Within the profession, it's interesting to see this demographic change too. Historically, we have been an all-male profession. Certainly when I graduated from veterinary school, the profession was predominantly male. That's totally turned around. 80% of our students now are female, and profession-wide out there practicing, we're about 50-50. So we're demographically, we're changing to a much more female-oriented profession. That has some implications for the profession, but also some challenges in terms of the education that we're getting. There's still a lot of demand for kids that want to become veterinarians, but the cost is going up. So some of those challenges are educational/economic, where the cost of education is going up, but the starting salaries are not going up commensurate with that. So these are all some of the challenges that we're facing as a profession and that the AVMA is actively engaged in.
Well, I know that over time, there's advancement. For instance, I never knew that it's wise to brush your dog's teeth, which I learned, you know, from AVMA and my veterinarian. So
Good, glad to hear that.
So you know, you're doing your magic,
Right.
in that aspect.
You know, and to that point, Toni, dental disease is the most commonly diagnosed problems in both dogs and cats. So it's a real issue, and I think without a visit to the veterinarian, many pet owners don't realize that their dog or cat has dental disease. So all the more reason for that routine checkup.
How about a little bit of information on your background? What school did you go to? What do you like about your position as executive director? And from some of my reading, I think you've won some awards too, if you can highlight on those.
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that I did most of my growing up right here in suburban Chicago, in fact, Mount Prospect, from 3rd grade through high school, and graduated from Forest View High School. I went to veterinary school at Purdue, and my career goal was to be a dog and cat practitioner. That's what I wanted to do. But I was on a scholarship from the U.S. Army, so once I graduated from veterinary school, I owed the Army 4 years. Marvelous time, 4 years in Colorado, and the focus was on care of military animals, but also I learned there the role of veterinarians in terms of food safety and public health. So after that, when I got out of the Army, rather than going into a private practice, I actually went to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Spent a 28-year career with the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, an agency within USDA that's really, as the name would imply, focused on the health of animals. And we know that healthy animals are paramount to produce healthy and wholesome food. So I started as a field veterinarian dealing primarily with a cattle disease called brucellosis, and over the course of that 28 years delved into everything from animal welfare to the regulation of genetically modified plants and animals. I exited after 3.5 years as the director of that agency, and then came to work for AVMA. So for me, it's been kind of a non-traditional career path, working for the government and now working as a largely administrator at AVMA. This has been a hugely rewarding position. We are central to what everything is happening with regard to the profession, and we have the ability to help direct and improve the profession into the future. So for me, a rewarding career with the government where I was involved in everything from animal welfare to our response to mad cow disease to now working for AVMA, where we really have potential to enhance the profession.
So AVMA does put forth policy for approval, and then the stamp is put on it, and then that's what everybody has to follow. Does it go through regulations?
Yeah, we set a standard for the profession, if you will. And while we don't have any regulatory authority, so if the AVMA publishes a policy on what's the appropriate use of antibiotics, it doesn't carry regulatory weight, but it has a tremendous amount of influence at the state legislative and even the national legislative level, so that our positions and our policies are given very serious consideration as laws and regulations are put in place.
So that's the reason for your other headquarters, which is in Washington, D.C.
Indeed.
And
We're
so
currently
they're your lobbyists.
Indeed, we have their job is to lobby, and you'd be surprised, but currently there are probably 20 or 25 pieces of legislation at the national level that would impact either the profession or the animals that we care for. And so we in fact are very active in Washington, both on Capitol Hill as well as in the halls of those regulatory agencies that implement the regulations that affect the profession.
So it's interesting, I'm sure that the public, when we pass your building here off of Meacham Road, we look at it and we think pets, dogs, cats. But you do so much more. You work with cattle and pigs and exotic animals and just the gamut of animals.
You know, and that really is one of our challenges. The point of contact between the average person and a veterinarian is through a pet. When in fact, while that's a very important role that we play, and that human-animal bond is stronger than it ever has been, in large part the public doesn't understand the other roles that veterinarians have. Taking care of our livestock, It's because of veterinarians, in large part, that we have the most affordable, healthiest food supply in the world. Once those animals are processed, it really is veterinarians that are ensuring that that product is safe to eat, that it's wholesome for people. It was actually a veterinarian who diagnosed West Nile virus in the United States for the first time. So wildlife veterinarians, and we're finding that for many of these diseases that affect both people and animals, there's a wildlife reservoir. And so veterinarians that are involved in wildlife diseases are important. The advances through laboratory animal medicine and biomedical research, it's the veterinarians that are taking care of those animals and overseeing a lot of that research. So one of our challenges, I think, is to get that word out to the public, that your veterinarian that you see across that exam table is just part of everything that the veterinary profession is doing.
I understand that I'm going to be talking now to Dr. Heather Case, who has knowledge in the disaster element with the service dogs,
Right.
and some other really good information. So off I'll go.
Indeed, I'm glad that you're going to talk to Heather. We're finding that with every natural disaster, there's an animal component. And this really hit home with Hurricane Katrina, when people were unwilling to evacuate without their pets, and yet there was no provision for taking care of pets. So I'm glad you're talking to Heather because of that, but also Heather, I think, is a good example of the expertise that we have here on staff. I mentioned about 150 employees, and about 25% of those are veterinarians who, in their own rights, are subject matter experts. So you'll enjoy Heather.
After Heather, we're going to stop and say goodbye to you.
All right, look forward to that.
Okay. Well, I'm here with Dr. Heather Case. Thank you for this interview. And what I'd like to have you touch on are some of the things we didn't touch on when I talked to Dr. DeHaven, and one of which is the disaster, the human-animal bond, those kinds of issues that our general public would be very interested in.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And we know here at AVMA that nearly 60% of the public in the United States have pets. So that's a fairly significant number, clearly. And of those nearly 60%, about 60% have more than one. So the bond between people and their pets. Further, we also know that very few people consider them to be, maybe the eyes of the law see them as property. But we know that the public think of their pets as family members or as more than property.
You get very attached to an animal, and quite quickly. And there are so many different types of animals out there that, can you kind of explain the difference between maybe a therapy dog and a disaster dog and all of that?
Sure. So therapy dogs may be called in when someone is in the midst of a stressful situation, and we know that the presence of an animal is comforting and calming. Versus a search and rescue dog or a working dog, they're going to be called upon to do a job, to do a very specific job. They're highly trained, and they are able to go in and, for example, find a missing person in a pile of rubble or something following a disaster, for example.
And we have had so many disasters lately. Katrina, started with Katrina, and there's one right after the other. There is a component here at AVMA that deals with the disaster dogs. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So the AVMA, and it's actually, we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year. Since about 1993, the AVMA has been involved in emergency preparedness and response, specifically with our Veterinary Medical Assistance Team program. I actually was a volunteer on the VMAT teams during the times of Katrina, and had some firsthand experience deploying. And those veterinarians are veterinarians and veterinary technicians. We have almost 200, or around 200 of those volunteers. They're highly trained to go out and assist veterinary medical needs following a disaster or some type of event like that.
When you say, is it VMAT that you said, what does that acronym stand for?
Correct. So VMAT is Veterinary Medical Assistance Team. And it historically was a private-public partnership, so we would deploy and be a part of a government team, and that changed in about 2009. And so we're now a fully AVMA program, generously funded by AVMA's foundation, or the American Veterinary Medical Foundation. And so we're a gift essentially to the state. So what our teams are able to do is, following something like what has just happened in Oklahoma, if needed, we could send out some highly trained veterinarians and technicians to go and assist either in assessing what are the animal needs and what is the veterinary infrastructure like, or we could go in as basic treatment. What we're seeing, however, you've mentioned Katrina, a lot has changed with communities recognizing the human-animal bond. And what we are seeing is that the local communities have in place, in advance of these types of events, a team and or coordinated response in many cases for including pets and animals with the human response. And so probably the biggest piece that VMAT works on right now is training and assisting these state groups in building up their capacity.
How do you get your dogs, and how do you get your handlers, and who does the training?
So our program is veterinarians and veterinary technicians. So we don't have dogs per se. We do certainly work with first responders who have the highly trained search and rescue dogs. But these are veterinarians who are AVMA members or veterinary technicians who work with the veterinarians and volunteer. Many of them have been with the program the entire 20 years.
So you're there to support
That's correct.
the disaster dogs. You go on site, check their health.
We're
and how they're
actually
doing.
less involved with the disaster dogs, although we certainly will support them, but the primary mission really is all hazards, all species. And so when a community is impacted by a tornado, for example, a shelter will often be set up, and now, currently, we generally see a shelter for humans who have been impacted, certainly by the disaster, and somewhere in that same general location, ideally, is a shelter for animals as well. And so the role of the AVMA's Veterinary Medical Assistance Team program would be, if the state or local community is needing assistance for whatever reason, maybe their veterinarians have been fully impacted by the disaster and can't assist, then they could call on the Veterinary Medical Assistance Team program from AVMA.
It's so heart-wrenching to see that on TV where animals are caught on top of rooftops and that in a disaster, and it's so nice that AVMA has this component that can support the health of those animals.
Right, and one of the pieces of that program, in addition to having the actual volunteers that go out and respond, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of their primary role right now is to train and assist the states in building up their efforts, is also to reach out to our veterinary members about their important role in prevention and preparedness. And so you just mentioned the dog on top of the roof. That's always the heart-wrenching photo, and it's one that we see often. But we are really trying to educate the public to think of preparedness. So prevention and preparedness would be peace of mind, and how do we maintain the human-animal bond? And a lot of that is having a plan in place ahead of the disaster.
What is, we're going to go off course just a little bit. I'd like to know a little bit about your background and your role here at AVMA.
Sure. So I am a veterinarian, and I was a practicing veterinarian working in rural Minnesota, primarily on horses, but in a mixed animal practice. So I worked on dogs and cats and goats and sheep and cattle and horses as well, of course. And was actually a volunteer on the AVMA's Veterinary Medical Assistance Team program when Katrina happened, and had the opportunity to deploy, and was deployed down to Katrina actually for over 60 days to work on the response at that point. And so then through volunteering with the AVMA and getting involved in that response, I was also an AVMA Congressional Fellow, so I spent some time in Washington, D.C. and saw the policy piece and sort of how veterinarians are so important in the voice for those veterinarians that are in the field and then those veterinarians who are, or non-veterinarians actually, who are making decisions about the profession. That's what led me then to the AVMA, and I originally came here as AVMA's disaster coordinator, and now I'm the director of the Scientific Activities Division, which houses that program.
Yes, Dr. DeHaven and I, we brought up that division in our discussion, and we did go over quite a few things and all the councils and committees, and that is under that particular division, the scientific activities.
Right, right. So we, again, you know, the elevator speech is that we're the voice really for our member who is out practicing in the field, and those within the division are veterinarians themselves who have had varieties you know, of practice experience.
How many councils and committees are under the Division of Scientific Activities?
Sure. So we have a variety of topics that we cover, and we have two councils. We have the Council on Public Health and Regulatory Veterinary Medicine and the Council on Biologic and Therapeutics. So that would be the veterinarians need drugs, obviously, for practicing. So that's the group that looks at that. We also have a Food Safety Advisory Committee. We have an Aquatic Veterinary Medicine Committee. We have the Committee on Disaster and Emergency Issues, which has oversight of the Veterinary Medical Assistance Team program. We have the Animal Agriculture Liaison Committee, which obviously works on animal agriculture issues, and we have the Committee on Environmental Issues. So those are our standing committees that have volunteer leaders from the AVMA members that serve on them. And then we also have a couple of task forces. So right now we have within the division a task force that is looking at how antimicrobials are used, or antibiotics to treat animals, how those are being used in companion animal practice, and looking at how we can do that as efficiently as possible.
Well, one last question. I understand that you are pretty proficient in showing horses and riding horses.
I am.
Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Oh,
And
you've been
how
so
is it to balance your job with that? And
Sure.
so during the day you're working in veterinary medicine, and then your special hobby is also.
Right, right. And I'll admit that when you're a full-time equine veterinarian, so you're with horses all day long, it was a little bit easier to fit in the horses. And I have Morgan horses, so I'm sort of partial to that particular breed. But it's always about the balance. It's always about finding balance, and certainly, much as we talked about early on in the interview, the human-animal bond is very important, obviously, to all of us, especially those of us who are working on these issues day to day. So we make it a priority.
Many of the veterinarians have their own personal pets, is what I'm finding out. One last thing, more than the last thing, what is the favorite part of your job? What rewards you the most about this position?
The first word that came to mind for me is impact, and really, truly, the ability to make a difference. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people who are working in this profession, certainly, but the ability to make a difference, not only for veterinarians who are members of the AVMA, but certainly for the public that we serve, and obviously the animals as well.
Well, thank you so much for this interview. Enjoy your 150th year, and what did you say, 20th year?
20th anniversary
with the
for the
VMAT
program.
VMAT program.
Great. Oh,
Nice
thank you so
meeting
much.
you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Dr. DeHaven, thank you so much for this interview. Thank you for us coming here. It was such delight. And thank you, community, for watching this segment. I hope you learned something from us. And I wish you well with your 150th year.
Thank you.
And all your publications and all your ventures that you do. And when we had read the mission statement and objective earlier, you are definitely right on target and doing it all.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to highlight AVMA. In fact, we are very proud to be good corporate citizens of the city of Schaumburg.
In closing, is there anything you'd want to say to the public as we sign off?
Well, a couple of things. If you're a pet owner, understand the importance of preventive care and really the central role the veterinarians play in ensuring that your pet is going to have the healthiest, happiest, longest life possible. Also, understand the role that veterinarians play well beyond providing care to our pets. And as our mission statement would say, we focus not just on animals, but public health as we're advancing the veterinary profession, so we can do a better job of both.
Where should the public go if they want to order some of these materials? And maybe who should they call if they have a veterinary question?
We have a great website, avma.org, that provides access to all of these materials, and a lot of them really focused on schools, from kindergarten through high school for school teachers and students who may have an interest in the future of potentially becoming a veterinarian. And on that website is our phone number, and we'd be glad to receive phone calls from anybody in the community and help in any way we can as it relates to veterinary medicine.
One last thing, and I think I touched on it, but I don't know if we touched on it. AVMA awards. I think maybe we'll put a few on a table so you can see all of the awards that AVMA has won over the years.
It is a great organization, and I hope that you will do that. We're proud of the many things that we've accomplished over the years.
Thanks again.
My
Well,
pleasure.
this is Toni signing off, and thanks for joining us for this segment on the American Veterinary Medical Association.